Om Swastiastu. Hello everyone. Thank you for watching this video. Today I will the presentation in the first group in poetry. Now I will introduce myself. My name is Pandi Mariduma Sugyarta. I will explain you about the definition of the poetry. Definition of poetry. Poetry is a type of literature based on the interplay of words and rhythm. It often employs rhythm and meter, a set of rules governing the number and agreement of syllables in each line. In poetry, words are strung together to form sound, images, and ideas that might to be too complex or abstract to describe directly. And poetry is the other way of using language, perhaps in some hypothetical beginning of things. It was the only way of using language, or simply was language without chords, prose being, then directive and young rival. Okay, that's all about the definition about poetry. Next will be present about the function of the poetry. Okay, we'll be continue the presentation about the function of poetry. The first is express contents of the heart, the extents of romantic poems with a beautiful sentence can be a way to express your own heart. The second is about media, to convey criticism and unrest. Very often we see there are many problems. It social lives in the community, from small to things too big. And then the third is about giving motivation. Human life is currently like spinning wheel. There is time below and sometimes above when someone goes down, where someone needs motivation. In this position, we can use poetry to motivation others and ourselves. Restore pleasure. In this part, pleasure is important in lives. On way to restore a pleasure is to read or read a poetry, so we can clear and be happy again. So that's all for the function of the poetry. Next presentation will be continued with my group.
Okay guys, I will explain about 6 functions of poetry. There are 6 functions of poetry, such as the first, function of conveying information. Second, function of conveying ideas. The third, function of conveying experience. Fourth, function of conveying feelings. Fifth, aesthetic function or providing enjoyment. And the last one is function to drive readers' creativity. For the first, the function of conveying information is one of the functions to carry out by poem is to convey the certain information to the readers or the audience. The information is related to culture, politics, social, and the other aspect of human life. And I will give you one of the example of poetry that have the function of conveying information. There is some gay tongue, and this is the poetry. Okay, in the poem above, Mamam as Mahayana, who has lived in Seoul for several years as an Indonesian teacher, He provides information about a typical Korean food, namely samgyeopsal. Okay, the readers of the poem is invited to travel to go to the Korea through the typical dictions of food, the way the food is cooked, and the atmosphere in which the food in is several is served and eaten. Some get young, and a piece of chicken, black bowl, all season dishes, BQ fruits, snow comes, jungle ginseng, bottle soju, various kimchi, and the autumn. So their typical diction are related to food in Korea culture, which is not the same as in Indonesian food. Mom with heart true. This means that internationally or not, the poet has conveyed information about one of the typical Korean foods called samgyeopsal, and all season food that is usually eaten by kings and nobles who nowadays is often also served in a restaurant. For the next is the function of conveying idea. Okay, the second one is function of conveying ideas. Poetry is also written by the aim of conveying certain ideas that are very useful for mankind. In the following section of Khalil Gibran's poems, the essence of a good job is presented. So this is the poetry. The ideas conveyed in the poem, in that poem above, include how nature works. A worker who does not love his job, let alone feels forced or hate his job, he should not have to do the work. That is, Khalil Gibran wants to say that good workers are those who love or are happy with their jobs and their work. In addition to the expert from Khalil Gibran's poem, the famous Indonesian poet W.S. Rendra through 21 poetry learning for students wrote a lot of poetry that contains ideas. In his poem entitled With Love, Rendra conveyed the idea that love is the basic for connecting place, because with their love war ends, people will see another human being as friends, as one's own brothers, as oneself, not as enemies and criminals. And for the next, the third, the functions of conveying experience. For the third function is conveying experience. There are so many poems that function to conveying experience, both of personal experience or the experience of community groups that is voiced by the poet. However, most of poetry that deals with the experience is the poet's own experience. The following poems entitled Eagle, for example, it is the the experience of the poet Mustafa Ismail, that a man born in Aceh who later moved and settled in Depok. And this is the poem of Mustafa Ismail. So the poem above describe the experience by the poet Mustafa Ismail when Aceh was still in armed conflict. At the time, he was still living in Aceh and often returned to his hometown in Pate Raja. For him and other Acehnese at the time, the night seems very long, and it seems as if the sun had risen too long. People are not free to go out at night. Many people die for whatever reasons, and experience like this is hard for him to forget for a poet. Next, we move to the function of conveying feelings. The function of conveying feelings as a medium to convey feelings. It is found in many poems written for reason of love for someone, love for the country, love for religions, and to convey feelings of humanity. The following is a poem containing feelings of humanity written by Ahmadun Yogi Hervanda with the title Rohingya. Okay, function to drive reader creativity. This function is related to extent of a poet as a creator. As a creator, he will try to create the poems that he creates, especially in terms of the form of poetry. In Indonesian, for example, there are poems written by Ibrahim Satah and Sutarji Kalzum Barni, and an example of a poem Sutarji is as follows. So in the poem above, Sutarji Kalzum Bahri tried to create a form of pronouncing his poetry by doing repetitions that seem playful. However, if you pay attention or read carefully, the questions in the poems require the reader to look for appropriate answer. And herein lies the way the poet invites people to think creativity. Okay, that's all about my explanations about 6 functions of poetry, and the next material will be delivered by my friends.
Okay, I wanted to continue explain about the types of poetry. So, in the world of poetry, there are 4 types of poetry. So the first is ballad poetry, and the second is satire poetry, and the third is lyric poetry, and the last is dramatic poetry. So to make it easier for the types of poetry to be divided into categories, so the first is types of poetry by form. So it is means that poetry has a certain form, getting acquainted with the number of lines in a stanza or certain form created by the poet. So there are 8 types of poetry in this group. So the first is distihon, and then tesina, and then quatrain, and then quaint, sextet, and septima, and the last is stanza and concrete poetry. So all of these I will explain one by one. So the first is distihon. So distihon is a form of poetry consisting of 2 lines of a stanza, of one stanza. So according to Yusuf in 1995, distihon is a 2-line poem but express a complete idea. So here we can see example of the types of distihon. Okay, and the second is a terzina. So terzina is a poem in which each stanza consists of 3 lines or consists of 3 lines. So here there are examples of the types of poetry that is a terzina. Okay, here the example. There are each stanza consists in 3 lines. Okay, and the third is quatrain. So quatrain is a poem consisting of 4 lines in one stanza. So quatrain types of poetry including those produced by many poets in various countries. We can see the example of the types of quatrain. So each one stanza consists of 4 lines. Okay, and the fourth is quaint. So quaint is a poem consisting of 5 lines in one stanza. So here the example. So one stanza consists of 5 lines. Okay, and the 5 is sextet. So what's the mean about the sextet? Sextet is a poem consisting of 6 lines in one stanza. So here the example. So it is consisting of 6 lines in one stanza. Okay, and 6 is septim. So septim is a poem consisting of 7 lines. So very few of these types of septime poem have been widely circulated. So one example of septime poetry is the work of Delilah. So entitled is I Follow My Dreams. So you can see here the example. So it is consisting of 7 lines. Okay, for the next is stanza. So stanza is a poem consisting of 8 lines in one stanza. So here the example of the stanza by Adam Young. So it is entitled "Is My Dad My Superman?" Okay, and the last is sonata. So what I mean about the sonata? Sonata are poems originating from Italy, which were introduced by Indonesian poets to Dutch literature. So in total, the sonata consists of 14 lines. So the first and the second stanza consists of four lines, and then third and fourth stanza consists of three lines. So consider the following poems by Hashimi entitled. So here the example of the sonata, but it is in Indonesia. Okay, there is concrete poetry. So concrete poetry is poetry written by the poet by paying attention to a certain forms. In other words, concrete poetry is more concerned with graphic form or facial feature arranged similar to certain image or object. So, a zigzag shapes poem written by Sutati Kalsum Battery in the 70s include concrete poetry as well as poem written by another Indonesian poets such as Raharji and Rahim Gahlar. So I want to show you the example of a concrete poem by Raharji in 1987. Okay, here the example. Okay, now we are going to discuss the second types, that is types of poetry according to reading. The term reading with is meant in this section is how to read poetry orally or aloud or listen to it. According to the context of the reading, three types of poetry are known, namely auditory poetry, choral poetry, and narrative poetry. So, the auditory poetry, a name popularized by the poet Leon Augusta. So, I wanted to explain one by one. So, the first is auditory poetry. So, according to Salat in 2015, auditory poetry is a type of poetry that is rich in meaning, imagery, and atmosphere. So, it is very suitable. So, it is very suitable to be read or displayed through a stage performance. So auditory poetry is also called oral poetry because it is suitable to be described or read aloud. And the second is room poetry. Room poetry is poetry that is suitable to be read in a relatively small room because it does not require a loud and high voice. This is far different from auditory poetry. So according to Salat to 2015, room poetry is poetry that is contemplative, quaint, calm, and subtle. So it has little possible to be read or performed in front of the public. And the last is narrative poetry. So narrative poetry is poetry that consists of a story or can also be referred to as a poetry that tells a story. In it, there is a setting of time and place, character, and plot. Because it contains a storyline, these types of poetry is good to read. But how to read is require a more complex art, meaning that the reading of these poems should be acquired in a semi-drama. context. Even a narrative poems, there is active characters. It should it should be read by more than one characters, including presenting and characters. Background, if any, and also the narrator. The way to read narrative poetry can be done by combining the room poetry reading models and auditory poetry reading.
Hello everyone, my name is Iputu Ari Krisanda. Now I will explain about 6 ways to experience poetry. In the 6 ways to experience poetry, there are 6 experiences. Number 1 is read some funny poem. This is just to say by William Carlos. William and the hilarious parody of that poem. Variation on a Time by William Carlos by Kenneth Cox are two of my favorite poems. Both deal with everyday selfishness, snark, and love. One Perfect Rose by Dorothy Parker is a great poem to showcase the witty, bitter, and wonderful poem. It is also a great poem to make fun of what makes bad Clit's poetry so painful to read. There are funny forms for every different kind of humor. Number 2 is engines in a haiku op, also known as a haiku battle. This is a fun way to experience poetry with friends. One of my favorite haikus, which also qualities as funny form haikus are easy, but something they don't make sense generator. I once engaged in haiku battle via Facebook Messenger, but any medium will work. Number 3. Imitate your favorite poem. Taking some of the structure and original word of a poem but making it your own is a great way to dip your toes into some actual poetry writing. Think make your own middle poetry style. My favorite poem for imitating are Let America Be America by Langston Hughes, Fear of Opposition by Annie Sexton, and That Aforementioned William Carlos William poem. This is just say so I make the whole statement of a Let American again and change it to Let birthday parties be fun again, or Let family time be screen free again. You can use as much or as little of the words of the original poem as you need. Number 4. Watch some contemporary poem reads their work. YouTube is a great for many things besides watching cats fall of TV. Two my favorite poem to watch are Brian Turner, a veteran of the Iraq War, and Sharon All was audits to common things are especially beautiful, smart, and hilarious, and irreverent. Number 5. Find a classic and dust it up a little. The classics are classic for a reason. They deal with themes and questions that are relevant to any reader today. My favorite all form that make me question my life today are skippers, sonnet that time of year too many in behold, and 733 which deal with deal and all egg and metaphor. Read some. Number 6 is read some form that challenge you to get up and do something. Doing something make mean political action. It make mean releasing what you are grateful for, or it make mean going outside to feel the wind on your face. My favorite form that challenge me to get up the couch and start acting are Emily Dickinson poem March Madness is Dependence Since Mary Oliver poem The Summer Day, and just about anything that Langston Hughes has ever written. The most important piece to engaging your class in issue fun edits is to let them to see you having fun as well. So write that haiku, create your own form imitation, or get outside and appreciate some nature with your student. Thank you.